I'm sitting here and I've been reflecting on, how it is that I became who I am. And one thing I noticed that people will not do in life in general is they will not question the obvious. And one of the most obvious things in life that we do not question is our environment, our upbringing. In fact, if you look at modern society, which is contaminated with toxic positivity, self help, cliches, and all this other BS, is that we refuse to question the traditions and the foundations of our society, especially family. I would be willing to bet if you're a man between like 18 and 45, I would be willing to bet that you inherited the value of family from society and that family is not actually one of your highest values. This is not the same thing as hating your family. I want to be crystal clear about this. Now, I'm going to dive into family here in a second because there's something specific having to do with mother. So, what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about men growing up and not being powerful and not feeling good. What does it take for a man to feel good about his life? In order for a man to feel good about his life, I believe he needs to be mentally sovereign, which means that at the end of the day, you as a man, as a young man, as a boy, as a teen, need to be the ultimate authority in the universe, the ultimate authority in the entire universe. You must be that first. And the reason why is because if you learn early on to not be mentally sovereign and to outsource authority to everybody else, to not be the judge, the jury, and the executioner on any piece of advice you hear, on any phrase anybody says to you from the time you're born till now and until you die, you need to be the judge, the jury, and executioner on whether or not that is true, if it applies to you, and ultimately what you're going to do in response to what you hear and what you experience in your life. I believe that due to a lot of us having been raised by our mothers, and in a lot of cases being only raised by our mothers, this has caused a lot of us to become what society calls betas. Where, and really just to not even get too deep into that, I just want to talk about the, like a couple symptoms of becoming that type of man. So I don't mean beta in the traditional sense. Like I'm not about to scream red pill nonsense at you or whatever. I'm not saying that all the red pill is nonsense, by the way. It's just that with having only had like females to look up to, it's highly likely that you ended up becoming a people pleaser. Now I did. Listen, let me talk about myself. I was a people pleaser. And right now I'm at a point in my life where a lot of people aren't that excited to talk to me because nowadays people call me very blunt, very truthful, and sometimes kind of hurtful, sometimes kind of, what would you call it? Not quite stoic, but just very independent, like impenetrable. That's a good word for it. Like I don't let anything get into my mind now. But that's not how it started. What really happened first was that, as I got into my, I think I moved out of home when I was like 19. And then, I went on to try to live my life, build a life for myself. I had moved to Texas. And one of the things I noticed was that I was really trying to make up for what felt like missing masculinity. It felt like something was taken from me, something was stolen from me, something wasn't allowed to grow within me. Growing up, I was raised in a household that was dominated by female leadership, which was my mother, my older sister, and my grandmother. And due to that makes me, or that made me less able to deal with authoritative people when I got older, and in some cases, authoritative women. Now, this is not, I'm not saying that this is the case for everybody, but this is what I noticed. Growing up, I was raised in a household that was dominated by female leadership, which was my mother, my older sister, and my grandmother. And due to that makes me less able to deal with authoritative people when I got older, a video about women shouldn't be in leadership. This is not a video about me not being able to handle female leadership. I can handle female leadership, and I have. Um, a good friend of mine was my boss for many years, and she is a woman, and I thought she did a good job. So, but I've also had some women leaders that were not very good at their job. And what I want to point to there is that a boy, a man, a teen, whatever, the way the male brain works is it's logic first, and the female brain mostly runs on like feelings first. And so there's always just a fundamental sort of biological disconnect for men and women in that regard. All of this to say that when you're growing up, you have been raised by women, this a lot of times leads to you becoming a people pleaser. It leads to you not speaking up for yourself. It leads to you not taking up space. Notice how all the self-improvement advice that we get, notice the necessity and the prevalence of like self-improvement and red pill and all of these self-improvement adjacent things that we have right now. Notice that, the average person, not the average person, but the average man is like, oh yeah, I'm working on myself. I'm in monk mode. I'm doing this. I'm focusing on myself, blah, 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 blah. The fact that that industry exists at all right now should tell you everything you need to know. That should tell you that the existence of those things is there because a lot of men feel like they were missing something, which is good, right? Because self-improvement has a lot of very inspiring concepts and ideas and messages for young men to go and try to become a man. Notice how all the boys and the teens and the men are trying to become men. My claim is that you should have already been one, and that it wasn't even your fault that you aren't one. In order for you to have been what you needed to be, the problems that needed to be solved and addressed in your life, the nourishment, the mental nourishment, the physical nourishment, the social nourishment that you needed started in childhood. You need to be able to exist as you are and as you were sort of predetermined to be. And you can't do that well as a man when you start off in households where there is female leadership, where you are not encouraged to speak your mind. Let me give you guys a story time real quick. When I must have been, man, I don't know, maybe 13 years old, I'm going to guess. I was a teenager. And my little sister woke up and she was telling me that she was hungry. I did not know how to cook. And I went to my mother and I said, hey, my sister's, she's sick. I'm not going to say her name, but I'm not sick, but she's hungry. I'm sorry. And my mother complained that we were hungry and that she needed to stop and go cook. Right. So that happened first. So my mother goes to the bathroom. My little sister is sitting with me near the stairs, which was kind of close to that bathroom. And I did not know that my mother was in the bathroom. I did not know she was in there. So I'm talking shit. Okay. And I was just talking about logic. I'm a very logical person. So I'm breaking this down to my sister. I'm like, well, what she's saying is not making sense. You had kids. Here they are, right? You spread your legs open. That had consequences. You had kids. Here are the kids. They're right here. The kids are hungry. Okay, well, it's your responsibility to feed these kids when they're hungry. And if that's not bad enough, if you don't want to do it, then you need to teach us how to do it. Then the bathroom door opens. And my mom looks at me with the coldest eyes that she's ever looked at me with in her entire life. She's completely upset. She comes out. She's like, you're out here running your mouth and yada, 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 yada. And I stand my ground. And it's like, if you didn't want to do it, then what you're saying doesn't make sense. Then you need to teach me how to cook so that I can do it. You need to allow me to use the stove. And it was that moment. That was probably the first time that I stood up to my mother. And I did not get beat that day. Believe it or not, of all the times I got beat by her and my grandmother, that was one time that I did not get beat. And why not? Because it was in that moment that the logic sunk in and that my little sister heard it because that's who I was talking to. And I've had other moments like this in my childhood where I was always the kid of logic, where I'm like, I'm going to bring the actual truth of the matter to everybody's attention so that it's not deniable, so that it's undeniable. All of this to say that, this is where mental sovereignty comes in at. And as a boy, teen man, you have to be that authority, like I was saying. When I was younger, and when I was in high school, I was more like a nerdy kid. One of my survival strategies growing up in the chaotic household that I grew up in was to become extremely intelligent. And this was also a survival strategy at school. I didn't have the courage to really like speak up for myself or stand up for myself, like with other boys at in elementary school mostly. And so one of my survival strategies was to become very smart, and that's what people like know me for now. I was like an honor student by the time I got to high school, and for school, that strategy worked because I was, we had, there was like bullies that existed, but I rarely got bullied because the bullies needed me when it was time to pass a test, and so that was basically my strategy to survive and to have a good day at school. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be messed with because um, they know that I can actually help them pass this class. And actually, I think probably one of the like toughest, rough around the edges dudes that was in our class in elementary school. I'll never forget him. I strategically like got aligned with him like right from the jump. Anytime he needed help, I was right there. You know what I'm saying? So I came out unscathed when it came to him. But as far as the household goes, a lot of people don't realize this, but the fearful avoidant attachment style, for example, which is a very which is probably among the insecure attachment styles, that one is the most interesting. That is the attachment style that I developed through my childhood at home. And this attachment style is very good at figuring out strategies to survive. That's basically why they don't do so well in relationships, why they crave love. They crave love biologically, right? So we all sort of have that. But then we fear love because of all the trauma and the stories that's held about how love looked for us. The brain doesn't forget that. With with my childhood, my grandmother was a tyrant in the house. And I do believe that due to just the constant chaotic environment and her rule in the house, that has led to me in this maladaptive relationship strategy. As a homosexual, I believe it's probably also led to not the homosexuality itself, but it's led to a maladaptive form of it. If you look at a lot of gay men out there, there's nothing but dysfunction in the gay community. You got the DL boys that are um they can't be true about what they like, so they have to hide it. So they still date women, and they got to make homophobic comments all the time. They got to say no homo all the time. They got to say no diddy all the time. They got to say, hey bro, run that back all the time. They're sagging their pants. It's what they really like is leaking out in other ways. So that's one example of dysfunction in like the gay community. Another example of dysfunction is all the anxious, preoccupied men who are out here looking for avoidant men to basically handle their daddy issues. As an avoidant, I attract a lot of these men. And one thing I've noticed about these men too is that they um they seek us out, like I said, to kind of fill in their subconscious zone around needing like that masculine figure. And it doesn't really matter like what you say to these people, to these types of guys. You've probably run into these guys dating if you're an avoidant, dismissive, or fearful avoidant gay man. These guys literally, like, you can almost not get rid of them. I see a lot of videos online about people who hate the avoidance. And I understand that. I understand the frustration, but none of the anxious, preoccupied people are taking any accountability in the fact that they actually go and seek out these avoid men. I remember when I was with my ex, before we got together, he asked me, hey, are we going to be in a relationship, or are we going to do something different? Are we just going to be friends with benefits, this type of thing? And I remember thinking, like, you know what, I'm just going to tell the truth. And I was like, you know what, I like you, but we're just going to be friends with benefits. I got my own issues. I think you have some issues as well. And that boy would not take no for an answer, ever. He would not take no for an answer. And then that activated some of my fearful avoidant tendencies, where it's like, oh, well, I kind of want to be close, but then I don't want to be close. And so then he stuck around, and then we had a okay but pretty dysfunctional relationship. And a lot of times the avoidant people, all over the internet, are like, oh, the avoidants won't tell the truth. They just won't come out and say what they want, and yada, yada, yada. I told him at the beginning, no. And then when we ended up inevitably getting into the relationship anyway, when I asked for my needs, those needs didn't get met. I'll say, yeah, so I have a love language around quality time. And for me, quality time looks like we go fishing together. We watch anime together. We sit down and we have conversations together. That's how I bond. What does he do instead? He wants to buy me flowers, buy me gifts, have more sex. It's like, you're not even listening to what I'm saying. Which brings me back to my central point. This mental sovereignty concept also applies to what you have to say. If you come across a person in your life, as a man, as a boy, as a teen, and they are not listening to you, this is a red flag. One of the things that comes up in my inner monologue a lot that I've noticed is that other people in my life, I've noticed this pattern. It's like they do not listen. They do not listen. My ex didn't listen. My mother didn't want to listen. My grandmother sure as hell didn't want to listen. I've had bosses that didn't want to listen, and they came back to bite them in the ass, like when I was an assistant manager. I've had employees that won't listen. I've had friends that won't listen. Like people who've come to me because I'm good at weight loss and all that type of thing. People have come to me like, what's your advice? I say, oh, do this right here and just do precisely that, and you will lose weight. Don't listen. And they're still fat. Of course you're still fat, because you're not listening to what I'm saying. You're not trusting my wisdom. So people who do not trust your wisdom, they do not trust your words, they don't listen to you, they do the opposite. These people must be eliminated from your life. And I got a couple minutes left, and so I want to talk about this point, this point of people having access to you. Throughout my life, I've done a lot of self-improvement work. And I've tried my best to become more social, become a better man, all these things that basically society wants you to do. But ultimately, what needs to happen is you need to be able to not get into situations in the first place. I've noticed a lot of times in life, we look at a situation that happened and we go like, oh, we break it down, all the details. This went wrong, that went wrong. He said this, she said that. This happened and then it led to this. Sometimes it doesn't even matter. All that really matters is you have to ask yourself, well, how did I end up in this situation? And how do I not end up in situations like that in the future? Because a lot of times with people who don't listen to you, who don't let you be a man, take up space, have mental sovereignty, a lot of times what's really going on there is a lack of respect, and the fact that you give them access to you. With my ex, when I told him no, that I didn't want to be in the relationship, what should have happened next is I should have cut him off completely. I should have stopped responding. Because what people do, because all this love bombing and not listening to you, all this shit is love bombing. All this stuff is manipulation. by letting somebody even talk to you. A lot of you people out, a lot of you guys out there that struggle with boundaries, the fact that people even have access to talk to you means that they don't understand yet. They haven't learned yet. They're not comprehending that what you're going for in life and who you are is a sovereign, powerful man. I realized many, many times, especially recently, these are like some of these are fresh insights that you simply you have to go like no contact. Sometimes you have to go no contact with relationships. Sometimes you have to go no contact with friends. I've had to do that many times. Sometimes you have to go no contact with your employer, who thinks they can just reach out to you anytime they want to do X, Y, and Z. No, 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 no. Part of the mental sovereignty is figuring out a way to make sure that people do not have access to you that you don't want to have access to you. Figure out who deserves access and who doesn't. I know I went in a lot of directions in this video. This is about mental sovereignty. This is about how men end up becoming betas. All this ties into mental health. Men are mentally unhealthy because they have not yet become just baseline need. They haven't met the baseline needs of being a man. I'm going to talk about this more. I'm out of time. I'll see you guys in the next video.